I've been searching for one of these for a long time, and I finally found one. This antique icebox is over 100 years old, and it kept food cold without using a single watt of electricity. Before modern electric refrigerators, families relied on ice boxes like this, cooled by a single block of ice. This one was built around 1914 by the Ranny Refrigerator Company, back when most homes didn't even have power. This old forgotten piece has suffered years of neglect, but I have a plan for it. My name is Barry, and it's good to be with you again. Today I'm going to attempt to restore this beautiful piece of history, and it's especially fun to restore a piece like this while imagining that for many of us, this was the way of life for our parents or grandparents. I recently purchased this antique icebox at a resale shop for $120. That's a great deal, especially since most that I see around here in similar condition go for between $300 to $500. The hinges and other hardware are non-magnetic, so I'm thinking they might be solid brass, and that would be a pleasant surprise. I didn't know it at the time, but these handles would eventually reveal a major clue regarding the time period of this piece. The nameplate, or label, suggests that this icebox was a Lapland monitor, manufactured by the Ranny Refrigerator Company out of Greenville, Michigan. As advertised, the name Lapland indicates that solid oak was used, and monitor referred to the use of ash, both hardwoods that were durable and plentiful in the Midwest at the time. The original finish under the nameplate looks to be shellac, but I'll confirm later. My first guess was that this icebox was manufactured during the early 1900s, at a time when you could likely purchase a similar model for around $25. While removing the hinges, I discovered this on the back side of one handle, patented April 7, 1914. The hardware may have been manufactured by a separate company, but this date still provides strong evidence that this icebox was manufactured during the 19-teens. The internet is often a great resource for a restoration like this, but it was a pleasure to purchase this book by Jonathan Rees to better understand the rich history of American refrigerators, and more specifically, the massive ice harvesting industry during the American Industrial Revolution. Although a simple concept, most of us probably don't really know how these ice boxes worked. By 1900, only about 10% of U.S. homes had electricity, mostly in urban areas, so an ice box was used to keep food and beverages cold. Every few days, the iceman would deliver a 50 to 100-pound block of ice to your home. The ice would often be stored in a top compartment. The cold air from the ice forced warm air out the lower compartment, thus creating a convection cycle. As advertised, the inside of the ice boxes were lined with galvanized iron, or an enamel. The coating was often zinc. Zinc was used inside old ice boxes because it handled the harsh, wet environment well, while keeping food safer. It resists corrosion, so it protected surfaces from constant moisture, and when used as a coating over iron or steel, it acted as a sacrificial layer to prevent rust. I didn't find any treasures in this old icebox, but thankfully the drain pipe is still intact. This would distribute water from the melting ice down below the cabinet into a collection tray, and this is why the front panel of the cabinet swings out. You might be wondering what I plan to do with this old icebox. Well, the ideas are slowly developing as I continue to work. This is clearly solid oak, and there isn't much of a protective finish left, other than what's under the nameplate. The hardware is non-magnetic, hopefully solid brass, but at least brass plated, so I decided to take the risk and polish these using the benchtop wire wheel. It won't really matter whether the original finish is shellac or lacquer, since most of it has worn off, but I'd still like to know which finish to use to restore this as close to the original as possible. Shellac flakes are dissolved in denatured alcohol, so I'll use a little alcohol and some fine steel wool to remove this protective finish. It does in fact appear to be shellac. I can't reply to every comment, but I do read them all, and I thought it would be fun to hear from you. So, based on your culture or country of origin, what drink do you think you would have kept in an old icebox in the early 1900s? I'm also excited to share some of my own choices. The harvesting of natural ice for home use in the United States began in the early 19th century, most notably pioneered by Frederick Tudor, often called the Ice King. Starting around 1806, Tudor and others developed a commercial system of cutting large blocks of ice from frozen lakes and rivers in the winter, especially in New England, and storing them in insulated ice houses packed with sawdust. Sawdust was used because it was cheap and readily available. Also, sawdust contained lots of air pockets, which acted as an insulator, keeping out warm air from the outside. I soon discovered it was not much more than sawdust or wood shavings used to insulate these old ice boxes. By the mid-1800s, this ice trade had grown into a major industry, with ice shipped by rail and boat across the country and even exported internationally. Advances in tools like horse-drawn ice plows and conveyor systems made harvesting more efficient, turning what was once a local, seasonal activity into a large-scale commercial enterprise. During this restoration, I even learned about an old ice house that was once located along the Rock River in my own hometown of Watertown, Wisconsin. With most of the minor structural repairs complete, I can move on to sanding. I'm not sponsored by Surf Prep, but I use their electric sanders and dust extractor for every single restoration project. With a variety of abrasives and the sponge-like sanding pads that conform to each unique profile, this method of sanding often makes light work of the most dreaded part of the restoration. Most of the joints on the doors were loose, so I simply brushed on some Titebond wood glue and clamped these together until they were dry. I'm not sure any of these trays are original to the piece. In fact, most are just rough plywood, but two are nice enough to still use. One tray appears to be solid ash, and the other plywood with white oak veneer. Once sanded, I applied Odie's oil, a food-safe hard wax oil. As I began sanding the solid oak cabinet from 150 grit to 180 grit, I realized this might actually be the most efficient and satisfying sanding I've ever done on an old piece of furniture. By the late 19th and early 20th centuries, delivered ice became a staple of urban and suburban life, supporting the widespread use of household ice boxes, early refrigerators that relied on blocks of ice to keep food cool. Ice delivery wagons made regular rounds, supplying homes with fresh blocks that were placed in insulated compartments. This got me thinking about the difficult job of hauling 50 to 100-pound ice blocks into homes every single day. I wondered if I could actually find a useful tool that could be staged with this piece once restored. If so, it would certainly have its own unique way of telling more of the story. I don't actually know how much of the protective zinc coating is still on this iron lining, nor does it really matter. I think the best thing is to sand the surface with a fine grit, then protect it later with a coat of clear wax. This should at least prevent what's left from continuously flaking off. To protect the polished brass from tarnishing quickly, I'll spray on several light coats of lacquer for brass. With most of my restorations, these century-old pieces are usually left still showing many signs of normal wear and tear. The character marks are without question what tell all the unique stories. Although I do strive for perfection with my work, I have never and will never achieve that standard with any restoration project. But I can certainly tell you how I feel about a piece like this one. No matter the style or the era, anything created with a specific purpose earns my appreciation when it's done with true quality. With its shiny brass handles and beautifully crafted solid oak, the workmanship here is something to admire, and it's exactly why this piece will continue to stand the test of time. I'm not actually sure if my grandparents used ice boxes in their homes before the modern refrigerator, but it's quite possible. I was born in the 80s here in Wisconsin, and over the years, I have probably taken for granted all of the quality furniture that's still around this area today, mostly because so much of it was manufactured right here in the Midwest. With that said, I'm thrilled to still have a piece of history right here in my workshop that's been in my family for nearly 75 years. You see, the icebox and ice harvesting industry began to decline in the 1920s and 1930s with the rise of electric refrigeration, which eliminated the need for harvested ice. While the natural ice industry faded, antique ice boxes remain a reminder of this era, reflecting a time when preserving food depended on a carefully managed supply chain of winter ice. Fast forward to 1951, when my grandparents purchased this brand new GE refrigerator and freezer. It still works today and is a testament to the quality and craftsmanship of bygone eras. If you've ever spent hours or days completely sanding a quality piece of furniture, then you may understand reaching this point. I stood back and admired the natural beauty of this solid oak, almost not even wanting to stain it. It's true, I guess I don't have to. The choice is certainly mine, but for something like this, it feels right to restore this back to the way it may have looked when it left the factory. I proceeded to use a foam brush to apply this oil-based penetrating stain in the color golden oak. Factory workers would have likely just sprayed on a tinted shellac for mass-produced pieces, so applying stain like I'm doing here will pose the risk of uneven absorption, leaving some areas looking blotchy. That is in fact what happened, but I was prepared for this, and I'm hopeful I'll be able to correct that with the next few steps. I'll thin out this shellac with more denatured alcohol. This will give the right consistency to spray through the 1.8mm tip of the HVLP sprayer. To help mask some of the inconsistencies from the staining, I'll add a little Trans-Tint to the shellac, then spray on several light coats until I'm satisfied with the results. It's early spring here, and it was about 60 degrees Fahrenheit the day I sprayed the shellac, so I wasn't concerned about the shellac developing blisters from the direct sunlight. The shellac did still have a few areas of blistering, but I can knock that down with a 320 grit sanding sponge. This will also help eliminate the glossy sheen of the shellac. The final step before assembly is to apply a furniture wax polish with a Scotch-Brite pad. I'll use this Fitty's polish wax in the color antique brown. This not only helps add an additional layer of protection, but also helps tie together some of the contrasting wood tones. After about 15 to 20 minutes, I'll buff the wax with a cotton rag, and this is when the piece really starts to come alive. I'm keeping the old screws with this piece, but several were already missing and many others were in rough shape, so I decided to use new brass screws. Although the Phillips heads are not period correct, the new screws secure the hardware to the cabinet so well that I won't even be afraid of slamming the doors on a daily basis. At the moment, room temperature is 68 degrees Fahrenheit. I have other plans for this old icebox in my workshop, but I just had to try this. With just a few ice bags, the temperature dropped to 48 degrees Fahrenheit after a few hours. I would imagine with several more ice bags, I may have reached 40 degrees, but I was just happy to see this thing working again. For me, preserving history is about celebrating diversity, people, and culture. Here in the Midwest, if you're from Michigan, your memories might have a deep connection to Verner's. If from central Indiana, maybe the shape of the Coca-Cola bottle recognized around the world resonates with you. And here in Wisconsin, Sprecker's root beer would be my choice. My name is Barry, and I can't thank you all enough for your love and support. Many of you had the idea of using this in my workshop to store chemicals, and that's exactly how I'll be using this cabinet for now. Goodbye for now.